Hey everyone, welcome back for another week on this YouTube channel. I have a special guest here. I'm so excited to bring her on, and I'll let Laine introduce herself. So go ahead, Laine.
Hi, I'm Laine. I'm a neurodivergent special educator and transition specialist. And I started in the special ed field about 15 years ago. And I'm really excited to be here.
That's awesome. So we're going to talk all about neurodiversity, neurodivergence, being neurodiverse. Like, obviously, I have no personal experience, so that's why I felt really Laine was going to be the best person to bring on so that she can speak from her personal understanding and experiences. And this is something that I am super passionate about learning more about because there's such a need to listen to authentic voices with any disability, any category. Like, we really need to pour ourselves back into the community and learn and listen and grow. So I love that. So tell us a little bit more about what energizes you about education, special education, schools, whatever you want to share about.
Sure. So I really like this question because I've always I've always commented to my coworkers that something that I'm the most passionate about is just how everyone's brain is different, which really ties into our theme that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just think it's really interesting that all our brains are there's just a wide spectrum for every single disability, for every single type of person. So special ed was just a natural passion of mine.
Yeah.
Actually started like right away working with teenagers with
Mhm.
traumatic brain injuries. That was my first job.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was just really neat to kind of get a feel for how different brains work, how different behavior looks for each individual within a disability category. And yeah, I've just really liked since way back then working in a residential school all the way up through my current what I'm doing currently. There's just a lot. There's so much to learn, and so I
Yeah.
think it just makes me really excited to know that it's kind of endless, like the information we can learn.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your own neurodivergence and how you've kind of learned and you're growing to learn more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I found out I had ADHD when I was in college. I actually had disability services for chronic migraines. And when I would go to the disability service meetings, the guy meeting with me was like, I think you have ADHD.
Yeah.
I think you should get evaluated. So I did that in college. But I didn't really take it too seriously. I definitely didn't consider myself neurodivergent. I kind of thought I could like outsmart it. That doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense, but
Yeah.
I I didn't consider myself disabled at all for sure.
Yeah.
So when I was working in the special ed field back then, right out just out of college, I didn't consider myself part of the population, and that kind of changed like 2 3 years ago. Really when I started my current venture, transition abilities. So I make curriculum for neurodivergent learners, and I got into social media and I was, posting for my business, and I started following all these people with lived experience that are neurodivergent. And that's when I really dove really deep into learning more about autism and how autism can present in women or female at birth people. And yeah, then very recently, like in the last couple of months, I've figured out that I'm also autistic. So
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And I've kind of watched a little bit of the outside of that as you explore yourself and learning more
yeah.
about how your brain works. So it's been really cool to get to know you as a friend and also through social media. So for those of us that maybe don't know as much information or just are really just learning to grow, like, what is neurodiversity, neurodivergence, and being neurodiverse? Like, what is that?
Yeah, so neurodiversity is just the diversity of human brains. So a neurotype is like a type of brain. So autism is a neurotype, like neurotypical is a neurotype.
Mhm.
So neurotypes just describe how different types of brains vary and affirms that there's, this natural human diversity. And you could be neurodivergent if you were born, autistic, or you could be neurodivergent if you had PTSD when you were,
Mhm.
7. That also changes your brain. So it
Mhm.
isn't, being neurodivergent isn't necessarily something you're born with. It could also develop over time. Um, so neurodivergent itself, the term is just an umbrella term, and it describes anyone with a brain that is not like your typical neurotypical brain.
Yeah.
Um, neurodiverse describes a group of people. So you wouldn't say that, like, oh, Laine's neurodiverse. You'd say Laine is neurodivergent.
Mhm.
You could say a group of people, like my classroom's neurodiverse, if you had a mix of, disabilities and typical people in there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
That's cool. Thanks for breaking that down for us, because I know sometimes people use those interchangeably, or you, like you said, explaining a group of people versus one person. So yeah, thanks for breaking that down for us.
Sure.
So this whole concept of being neurodiverse affirming, we want neurodiverse practices that are affirming for our students and staff that we know maybe. So what is that all about, and what does that actually mean to be affirming in the neurodiverse community?
Yeah. So I know when I was in grad school, I think this is common for most special ed teachers. We were taught, um, a person that has a disability, we want to try to help them be the most productive member of society they can be, right? We want to help
Mhm.
them be independent, maybe get a job. Um, but in the past, that has sometimes unfortunately looked like trying to change the person to be, quote unquote, more normal, neurotypical. I don't like that word normal, but
Mhm.
that's kind of like the mentality that a lot of us are taught, and that's also what I used to do as a teacher. I would help students stim less in public because I thought it would draw attention to them. I would
Mhm.
do certain things that now I know are not neurodiversity affirming.
Yeah.
So I think it's helpful to have a conversation like this because we're all doing stuff that's not neurodiversity affirming, and
Mhm.
the point is to learn about it and to try to do better, and it takes time and practice, and there's a lot of unlearning to do. But basically the gist is like that the idea of a healthy brain or a normal brain is a social construct, and neurodiversity kind of moves away from that medical model or like pathology paradigm, and instead is in this, instead of thinking of traits of, we'll just use autism as an example, as a deficit,
Yeah.
just recognizing it as a natural variation, that can happen just like skin color or hair color or
Mhm.
anything. It's just a trait. um, and yeah, and I think that I definitely wish I'd known sooner just how vast every spectrum of every disability extends, because I think that's an important part to recognize as well.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I honestly love that concept that we're moving towards that way, because I even just in my own brain, I've realized, like, when I stand still, it's hard for me, like, so if I'm ever anywhere, I'm already always doing something like this where I'm swaying my body weight back and forth, so
Yep.
I feel like I'm been more aware of that, of, like, my body needs some movement too, so, like, why would I make
Yeah.
my students stand still? Like, that's just not
Right.
a thing.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so yes, changing the narrative, changing the way that we do things, being more accepting and acknowledging, like, that they might need that as much as I need that. So I love
Right.
that so much. I think that's
Yeah.
phenomenal. Um, so how can we best support our students in the classroom? Typically we have some type of melting pot of students and disabilities, and we want to be accepting of all of them and affirm them as best we can. So really, what can teachers do?
So I think the first thing to keep in mind is to be open to learning new information, as we were kind of talking about, because if it might not match what we were previously taught or what we've been trained to do. But so one thing we can be open to learning about is terminology, and starting to change some of the deficit based language that we use. Like doesn't look someone in the eyes appropriately. or, like that's an example of a social construct of a deficit that isn't necessarily a deficit. Um, like something I've been unpacking personally is that it is harder for me to look people in the eyes, but I just do it because I know it's expected of me, and I look more neurotypical. But that doesn't mean that I'm actually listening as well when I do that. So same for our students. Like if we're able to acknowledge that a student, like you're saying, needs to move while listening, maybe has a fidget while they're listening, is maybe they're staring at the floor, but they are taking it in. Things like that. Instead of, making everyone face forward, sit still, quiet hands on the desk, that type of thing. Um, sometimes we do need to redirect a student
Yeah.
to pay attention, obviously, but
Mm.
um just checking first, right? Like, are they
Yeah.
paying attention?
Yeah, I was teaching
um
a lesson today actually, and I had a student who was staring out the window. Their back was facing me. I had a student sitting on the floor. I had a student sitting in a chair in their desk, but looking at the table while I was teaching. And honestly, like I just kept going. And then when it got to like,
yeah,
hey, can you answer this question? Like they jumped right in, and I was like, that's fine with me. And
yeah,
I loved that. And I was like, I looked around and I was like, is anybody really paying attention? Like, but what I know is eyes on the board and you're sitting
right,
quietly, and like that might not be the best thing for that learner or those group of learners. So yeah, love
right.
them.
Yeah, that's exactly, I've had that experience as well. It's like it's really interesting to be like, um when you're teaching in front of a group and you're like, is anyone paying attention to me? But I mean, that's why we ask those follow-up questions, and then you know.
Yeah, yeah, and they
Yeah,
were on it. Like they were able to like, all right, 4 + 2, great. We know this one. Okay, let's
right,
move on. Great, fantastic. Okay, I'm like your paying attention looks different than my paying attention. Like, and that's totally fine.
right.
So, love that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's one thing. Another thing is being aware of sensory differences, and
Mhm.
sometimes when we're supporting students and we don't know what is causing a challenging behavior, and if we're able to think a little more deeply about it and
Mhm.
consider a sensory possibility, that there's a
Yeah.
sensory challenge happening. I know a lot of us are already doing that,
Mhm.
but that's really important. Um, oh, also, this is something that early on when I was teaching, someone was I think, or maybe I was a para, someone was instructing me to work with an autistic student. Um, and that student was earning sensory breaks.
Mhm.
Um, so that's an example of something that isn't necessarily neurodiversity affirming, because a sensory break is like a need that someone
Mhm.
has. It's not something someone should be earning as like reinforcement, or to
Mhm.
um it shouldn't be withheld from them because they don't finish math, for example.
Yeah.
um yeah, so there's a ton of little things like that. I think it just takes time to, kind of dig in and learn this stuff.
Mhm.
On the topic of behavior modification too,
Mhm.
um, I think so. I was trained in ABA, and I really, I don't know. This is a tough subject to talk
Yeah.
about. I believe in the principles of behavior. Like I use them. My wife and I use them with each other. Like,
Mhm.
um, I think everyone's being reinforced all the time. I
Yeah.
think of things in a behavioral sense.
Mhm.
Um, but I simultaneously believe that, and also think we shouldn't be forced to appear neurotypical using behavior modification.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other nuanced part about ABA is that, you've probably seen some of the conversations on social
Mhm.
media about it, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, um, I just want to say I don't think that ABA being wrong or being a positive thing. I don't think either thing is true. I think that I disagree with any blanket statement about ABA personally,
Yeah.
because I think that there are parts of it that are helpful, and I think there's parts of it that could be harmful. And really, maybe ABA needs a little bit of reform, a little bit of changing. People, maybe um, what's the word? The terminology that people are taught maybe could be changed a bit. But I think that um, I think that we really need to listen, learn from people with lived experience on it, but also be open minded that maybe we don't know everything that there is to know about it right now.
Yeah, I think ultimately it does. It comes back to what you originally said. We are all different people. We all need different things. So as much as, yes, I've seen everything that's going around right now, it's like, but what works for one student or a client or a individual is not going to work necessarily for the next person. So there are things that need to be given and taken, and that give and try it, and great, that's not great, let's try something else. So I hear you with that, and I think I'm on the same page that we need to listen more, we need to learn, we need to grow. Yes, I hear you. Yes, I understand where you're coming from. How can we make this better? How can we
Right.
improve? What tweaks need to be made? Ultimately for the betterment of each person, right? Including myself. What tweaks can I make?
Right.
What changes can I make so that I can be a better person for myself? So I
Right.
I
Yeah.
agree. Totally with you. So now if staff are looking, maybe the teachers are watching here, maybe they want to empower more of their paraprofessionals or their therapists to learn more about neuroaffirming practices. What do you suggest that they can do?
Um, yeah, so I think this is obviously extremely important to train our paras. I always felt like my paras sometimes spent more time with my students than I did.
Mhm.
So it's vital. So basically we're not trying to fix anyone or make anyone more normal. We can reiterate that to our paras. And if a kid or a teenager is having a dangerous behavior, that's one thing. But if it's just that they're not presenting neurotypical, that's not something we're targeting.
Yeah.
um, I know I've had a lot of paras I've had to have conversations with about that, mainly because a lot of them have been in the field a while just like us, and they were taught something else, and times are changing.
Mhm.
So really just retraining and modeling that for your paras as well.
Yeah. Is there any sort of resources or websites that you can direct some people to that you like really found a lot of great information on, or like great handouts or PDFs or anything like that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of good websites and books and social media accounts and podcasts. So a couple websites are divergentminds.org. I also like Fidgets and Fries. That's a social media account that I follow,
Mhm.
as well as Disability Reframed. Um, if people are into books, so two really good books are called The Reason I Jump,
Yes.
and I have you read that one?
Yes, I absolutely love that one. I think I've read it 2 or 3 times already, and every time I feel like I get something different out of it.
Same, yeah, it's so good. Have you read Ido and Autismland?
I have not. That is not one on my
Okay.
list that I've read, so it'll definitely be a summer read for me.
Yeah, and then I want to read. There's a book called I Will Die on This Hill, and it talks about the I've heard that it's really good, and that it kind of talks about the disparity that sometimes happens between educators and parents, and then even just adults, neurodivergent adults, and how sometimes sometimes everyone's not getting along and working together to make things better. So
Yeah.
that's one on my list. And then if you're into podcasts, just search neurodiversity on whatever app you use. There's so many good ones.
Awesome.
Um,
So I will make sure to list all of these fabulous websites, social medias, books, and podcasts in right below this video, of course, so that you can find all of those. I know when Laine gave me this list originally, I was like, oh, that social media account I am not following. I will now follow. So I'm so excited to learn from others.
hey.
Is there any other tips and tricks that you have so that we can be as most neuroaffirming as we can for our students, and therefore be the models too for our staff that we are working with?
Yes. So something I forgot to mention before is teaching students about their disability and
Mm,
about disability
mm,
identity. I'm really passionate about that. I mean, I wish I'd been diagnosed as a kid. My life would have been a lot easier to know, just to know who you are and what your differences are. And, as early as we can teach a kid, as early as a parent. I know it's tough with younger
mhm,
kids, but if we can get parents on board and we can start those conversations earlier, that would be
mm.
great. Um, it's really it's shocking to me every time I've had an 18-year-old come to me and they have an IEP and they're in a
Mm,
self-contained class and they have no idea they have a disability. Um,
yeah.
so that's another really big one. And if anyone needs resources on that type of thing, I make a ton of resources on neurodiversity. Um, and I have a YouTube channel meant for kids with animated videos that
Oh,
teaches
cool.
kids about disabilities as well.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'll make sure to leave any of your links below so that everybody can find you as well as including that fabulous YouTube channel. I'm going to check that out as well. I know earlier this year I definitely bought some of your resources from Teachers Paid Teachers. So to
Uh,
help teach some of our students, I think that's a conversation we're starting to have more with our school. And if even families aren't ready for their child to learn about their disability, whether they're too young or just like not ready for that conversation, we do try to model like it seems that your body has a lot of energy right now. Let's go take a walk or let's
yeah.
go do something different. And trying to shape that language that like right now, this is how your body is looking and you might be feeling this way so that they can start placing that feeling and that emotion and that body sensory um need with it and kind of
Yeah.
pair it together and try to find different ways to do that. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really, really important. Yeah, because those conversations can happen even earlier than even talking about disability at all. So
Yeah. So that they can learn from themselves. Like my body it
yeah.
feels like it needs to jump right now. Great. Let's go on a trampoline and let's jump a little bit. And trying to shape that understanding of themselves in those in just even small ways.
Yeah.
So, cool. Great. This has been so helpful. And I know I've learned and grown just in these last couple minutes here. So I'm so excited to be able to share this with other teachers. If they have any questions or anything, make sure to leave a comment below. And I will make sure Laine can get back to you if I don't have that answer. But thank you so much for being here, Laine. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for watching today's video. If you're new here, make sure to click that like and subscribe button. It would mean so much to me. Click the bell to get notifications for when new videos get released or I go live. As always, leave a comment if you have any questions.